My name is Lisa Morgan. I'm 33 years old, and after 3 years away, I finally walked back into my mother's house for Christmas dinner, only to find myself shoved onto a folding chair at the edge of the table like some distant cousin instead of her daughter. The smell of roasted ham and pine candles filled the air. Children's laughter echoed down the hallway, and yet I sat lower than everyone else, my knees almost hitting the table my plate balanced on the flimsy plastic seat. "Don't fuss, Lisa," my mother said lightly, as if it were nothing. "It's just for tonight." But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. Every Christmas I'd missed every phone call that dwindled into silence every time my achievements were brushed aside for someone else's. Sitting there, my blazer too sharp for this sagging old dining room, I felt the weight of all the years I had spent trying to earn a place at this table. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been paying for this very roof over their heads. I had been carrying their bills, their groceries, their lights. And the moment they pushed me onto that folding chair, they also pushed me past the point of staying silent. Before I go any further, I want you to pause for just a second. Tell me where you're watching from. It's always wild to see how far these stories travel. And if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit that like button. Trust me, you're not alone. Families have a way of cutting the deepest wounds sometimes without even realizing it. And if betrayal, favoritism, or secrets hidden behind closed doors are things you've lived through, subscribe right now. Because what happened to me at that Christmas table only gets darker from here, and you won't want to miss it. I grew up in a small town in Vermont, the kind of place where winters felt endless and gossip traveled faster than the snowplows. Our house sat on a narrow street lined with sagging porches and leaning mailboxes, a white two-story home with green shutters that always needed repainting. Inside, the air smelled of laundry soap and whatever candle Mom had burning that week, usually cinnamon or apple pie, even in July. It was a house that should have felt warm, but to me, it always carried a draft I couldn't escape. From as early as I can remember, I knew I wasn't my mother's favorite. She didn't have to say it out loud, the evidence was everywhere. At dinner, she would pile mashed potatoes onto Maggie's plate, make sure Daniel got the biggest cut of meat slip Sophie and extra roll with butter. Me. Sometimes she forgot to put a fork by my plate, and I'd quietly get up to fetch one from the drawer while everyone else started eating. I still remember one night when I was 8. The kitchen smelled of fried chicken, and the table was covered with mismatched plates. I had spent all afternoon helping set the table, folding paper napkins into triangles, thinking maybe Mom would notice. When I sat down, though my chair was pushed a little farther from the table than the rest, I looked at her expectantly, waiting for some word of praise. Instead, she leaned across me to fix Sophie's hair ribbon and said, "Hold still, sweetheart. You want to look nice for the picture?" No one looked at me. I swallowed the lump in my throat and speared a drumstick, telling myself I didn't care. But the truth is, it carved deeper than I realized. School was my escape, and I clung to it like a lifeline. I worked hard, stayed late in the library, and dreamed of leaving town. In 7th grade, I won first place in the state spelling bee. The auditorium lights were hot on my face, and I remember gripping that little trophy so tightly my fingers hurt. I wanted to run home, wave it in Mom's face, and hear her say she was proud. When I burst through the door, though, she was in the kitchen, helping Maggie bake cookies for a church fundraiser. "That's nice, honey," she said absently, barely glancing at the trophy before returning to Maggie's dough. An hour later, neighbors came by to pick up the cookies. Mom showed off Maggie's tray like it was a gold medal. My trophy sat forgotten on the counter until Sophie knocked it over with her backpack and chipped the base. Nobody cared. That was the rhythm of my childhood, me fighting for scraps of attention while my siblings soaked up the spotlight. Maggie was the golden child, the perfect daughter who helped Mom in the kitchen and went on to teach at the local elementary school. Daniel was the son who could do no wrong, tinkering with engines in the garage and being called the man of the house before he even turned 15. Sophie was the baby 4 years younger than me, and Mom treated her like porcelain, always fragile and deserving of extra care. And me, I was the girl who wanted too much, the one always looking toward the horizon instead of the living room. One Christmas stands out like a scar. I must have been 12. Snow had piled high against the windows, and the living room glowed with colored lights strung unevenly across the tree. The smell of pine needles and Mom's eggnog filled the air. We sat cross-legged on the carpet waiting to open presents. Maggie tore open a box to find a brand new winter coat, deep red soft wool. Daniel got a set of tools heavy and gleaming in their plastic case. Sophie squealed over a dollhouse taller than she was. My gift was a thin paperback novel and a pair of gloves from the discount store still with the clearance tag attached. I remember tugging the gloves on, forcing a smile while Mom said, "See practical." The word sliced deeper than she knew. Practical. As if that was all I was worth. I didn't know it then, but that moment would come back to haunt me years later when I carried expensive gifts into that same living room. Back then, I promised myself that one day I'd give myself the kind of presents no one else thought I deserved. By the time I hit 16, I was working at the local diner every weekend, smelling of grease and dish soap when I came home at midnight. My paychecks were small, but I tried to help out slipping 20s into Mom's purse when I knew bills were late. She never mentioned them. One night, I caught Sophie bragging to her friends about the new boots Mom bought her. I recognized the exact amount from the money I'd tucked away. I said nothing, but the burn in my chest never left. That summer, I sat alone on the back porch, notebook in hand, dreaming of cities I had only seen in magazines. New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. Anywhere that felt bigger than our narrow street. The porch light buzzed with moths, and inside I could hear Maggie and Mom laughing over some TV show. I pressed my pen harder against the page and wrote the same sentence 3 times. I will get out. I will get out. I will get out. I didn't know it back then, but that vow would shape everything. It would become both my salvation and my curse. When I finally did leave, it wasn't dramatic, at least not to anyone but me. It was August, the air heavy with humidity, cicadas screaming in the trees. I'd been accepted to a college in Boston a few hours away, and I remember standing in the driveway with my duffel bag heart pounding like I was committing a crime. Mom hugged me quick and stiff as if she were patting down a stranger's coat for Lent. "Don't forget what really matters," she murmured. Her eyes weren't warm. They were critical, scanning me for flaws. Maggie leaned against the porch railing, arms folded, a smirk tugging her mouth. "Just don't come crawling back when the city chews you up," she said. Daniel revved his truck, pretending he was too busy to notice, but I saw the grin he tried to hide. Sophie sniffled dramatically as though my leaving was an insult to her personally. I climbed onto that bus, clutching a scholarship check and a heart full of defiance. The seats smelled like vinyl and cigarette smoke, and as the small town blurred past the window, I swore to myself I wouldn't look back. College was freedom wrapped in exhaustion. I worked part-time in the campus library, surviving on ramen and adrenaline. I loved every lecture, every stack of books, every crowded coffee shop where I could disappear into my own ambition. I called home every Sunday at first. The conversations followed a script. Mom updated me on Maggie's PTA events, Daniel's growing garage business, Sophie's latest cheerleading routine. When she finally asked, "How are your classes?" it always felt like an afterthought, a box to tick before she hung up. One autumn weekend, I came home for a surprise visit. The trees blazed gold and red, and the air smelled of wood smoke. I wanted to show them my new internship, proof that I was making something of myself. I walked into the kitchen and found everyone crowded around the table laughing at Sophie's stories. I started to tell them about my professor recommending me for a competitive program, but Mom interrupted, waving her hand. "That's nice, Lisa. Did you hear Maggie's casserole won second place at the county fair?" The room erupted in congratulations. My words hung in the air like smoke from a blown-out candle. I swallowed the sting, but inside, something hardened. Every time I tried to shine, my light was dimmed. Graduation day should have been my triumph. I walked across the stage in a cap and gown, my diploma, a ticket to the future. I searched the crowd for Mom. She was there, but her applause was lukewarm, distracted. After the ceremony, she posed for photos with Maggie's kids who'd tagged along. My diploma case rested in my lap like a forgotten prop. Later, she said, "Well, that's all nice, but when are you going to settle down? A woman needs a husband more than a job." I bit my tongue until it bled. After college, I landed an entry-level job at a marketing firm in Boston. The office was cramped, buzzing with fluorescent lights and the smell of burnt coffee. I threw myself into the work chasing promotions like oxygen. I still called home, though less often, and every time I did, I was reminded that distance didn't make me exotic, it made me disposable. The last real straw came when I told Mom I was moving to New York for a better opportunity. I called her one evening, excitement spilling out of me. There was a long silence on the other end. Then she said flatly, "So you're choosing money over family." The words were a hammer blow. I hung up the phone and sat on my apartment floor, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the blinking red light of the answering machine. It never blinked for me. New York was everything Vermont wasn't: loud, fast, ruthless. Yellow cabs honked like geese, the subways stank of metal and sweat, and the skyline glittered like a promise. I rented a tiny apartment where the radiator hissed all night, but I felt alive. I climbed the corporate ladder one rung at a time, cutting my teeth on failed campaigns, late-night brainstorms, and bosses who never remembered my name until I pulled off something big. The first promotion felt like victory. I bought myself a second-hand designer bag and called home, eager to share the news. Mom listened in silence, then asked, "Are you dating anyone?" I could almost hear her shrug through the line. "That's nice, but don't forget your sisters already gave me grandkids. Success doesn't keep you warm at night." I laughed bitterly after hanging up the sound bouncing off the cold white walls of my apartment. Over the next 3 years, those phone calls grew shorter, less frequent. I tried again during holidays, but every conversation turned into a roll call of my siblings' accomplishments. Maggie's devotion, Daniel's honest work, Sophie's kindness. My name was tacked on at the end like an afterthought. Oh, and Lisa's in New York doing whatever it is she does. There was one Christmas I will never forget. I stayed in New York that year, unable to face the hollow chair at home. Snow drifted outside my window, muffling the city's chaos. I sat cross-legged on my couch with takeout Chinese, the smell of soy sauce filling the room. On the phone, I could hear laughter echoing from Vermont. "Wish you were here?" Mom said, her voice distracted, before passing the receiver to Sophie. They were opening gifts. I listened as Maggie gasped over a new necklace. Daniel chuckled about a set of tools. Sophie squealed over some gadget. Then Mom remembered me. "We sent you something small, honey." I opened the box days later to find a discount sweater 2 sizes too big, still smelling faintly of mothballs. I folded it back into the box and shoved it into my closet. I didn't know it then, but that loneliness eating lo mein under fairy lights while my family toasted without me would become the lens through which I saw every holiday after. It was the echo that followed me even when I was surrounded by skyscrapers and success. By the time I was 30, New York had become more than an address. It was proof that I had built a life no one could take from me. My office sat high above the city glass windows, reflecting endless traffic and the Hudson glittering like steel in the distance. I wore tailored blazers, carried sleek portfolios, and walked with the kind of confidence I had once only scribbled into my teenage notebooks. Promotions came slow at first, then faster. Each one was a brick in the wall I built between myself and Vermont. But walls don't stop memories. One July afternoon, the phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice sounded smaller than usual, threaded with something I couldn't name. "Lisa," she said, "I just wanted to let you know I'm having a minor surgery. Nothing to worry about." My chest tightened. She brushed off my questions, saying Maggie and Sophie would help. Later, I learned the truth by accident through an insurance bill mailed to my apartment because my name was listed as her emergency contact. The numbers staggered me. Mom had quietly sold the house to cover medical expenses, then rented it back from the new owner. She hadn't told anyone. And when the bills stacked higher than she could manage, she called me. Not Maggie, not Daniel, not Sophie. Me. I wired the money without hesitation. I told myself it was temporary just until she was back on her feet, but temporary turned into monthly transfers, the mortgage turned rent, utilities, groceries, even Daniel's car insurance when his garage floundered. I became the invisible backbone of a family that still spoke about me as if I barely existed. There's a memory that haunts me from that time. I was on a business trip in Chicago, sitting in a hotel bar nursing a glass of wine. Nathan, my best friend, sat across from me, his tie-loosened eyes sharp with concern. "Why do you keep doing this, Lisa?" He asked. "They don't appreciate you. You're bleeding yourself dry for people who wouldn't lift a finger if roles were reversed." I stared into the glass, watching the light catch the red liquid. "Because maybe if I help enough, if I give enough, they'll finally see me." Nathan shook his head. "They won't. Not until you stop letting them take." His words lodged in me like splinters, uncomfortable but impossible to ignore. Still, I kept paying. Every month I clicked send on those transfers, telling myself it was love, not desperation. But deep down, I knew I was bargaining with ghosts. When I turned 32, I celebrated alone. My coworkers surprised me with a cake in the office break room, candles flickering under the buzzing fluorescent lights. They cheered, clapped me on the back, told me I was unstoppable. That night, I sat in my apartment overlooking the city's glittering skyline and waited for a call from home. None came. When I finally broke down and dialed myself, Mom answered, distracted. "Oh, it's your birthday." "Well, happy birthday, honey. I thought it was next week." In the background, I heard Sophie's laughter, Maggie's voice, the clatter of dishes. They were all together without me. That was the night I realized something cruel. I could move mountains, sign million-dollar contracts, keep the lights on in a house I no longer lived in, and still be invisible to the people who should have known me best. But then, November arrived, and with it an invitation I never expected. Mom called her voice unusually warm. "Lisa, we'd love for you to come home for Christmas. The kids keep asking about you." It would mean a lot. For the first time in years, hope flickered in my chest. Maybe things had changed. Maybe they were ready to finally see me. I threw myself into preparations. I spent over $2,000 on gifts, a sleek tablet for Mom, so we could video chat, a spa package for Maggie, kitchen appliances for Daniel and Isabel, toys and art supplies for the kids, something thoughtful for Sophie. I booked a first-class flight, rented a black BMW, and had my hair styled by a professional. I wanted to arrive not just as Lisa the daughter, but Lisa the success story. The night before my flight, I sat with Nathan in a cafe. Snow blurred the city outside, muffling the honks and sirens. I could barely contain my excitement. "They'll see now," I told him. "They'll have to. I've worked so hard. I can finally show them I'm not the selfish girl who left." Nathan's eyes softened. "Lisa, people don't change because you bring them gifts or drive a fancy car. If they've chosen not to see you all these years, don't be shocked if they keep looking away." I waved him off, clutching my latte like a talisman. "No, this time will be different." But as the plane descended into Vermont, the mountains blanketed in snow like a postcard, doubt gnawed at me. What if Nathan was right? What if, no matter what I brought, no matter what I did, I'd still be the girl on the folding chair, overlooked and unwanted? I pushed the thought down, tightening my grip on the armrest. The smell of recycled cabin air, the murmur of passengers gathering coats, the squeal of tires hitting the runway, it all blurred into a single, breathless prayer. Please let this be the time they finally see me. I didn't know it then, but that prayer was the very thing that would be shattered first, because walking back into that house wasn't a return, it was an ambush. When I pulled into the driveway, that Christmas Eve snow crunching under the BMW's tires, my chest swelled with pride. The car gleamed under the porch light, the engine purring smooth and expensive. For a moment, I imagined the look on Mom's face, finally impressed, finally proud. The front door opened before I could knock. Mom stood there in her faded blue sweater, her hair streaked with more gray than I remembered. She hugged me quickly, then leaned back with a cool smile. "You look very professional. Not warm, not proud, just clinical." Inside the house smelled of pine and roasted ham. The walls seemed smaller than in my memory, the paint more faded. Maggie bustled in the kitchen, hair pulled into a messy bun, kids shrieking around her feet. Daniel arrived with Isabel shaking snow from his boots. Sophie sat on the couch, scrolling her phone, her expression neutral until she saw me. Then it twisted into a polite, too-sweet smile. "Lisa, look at you," Maggie said, her tone stretched tight. "Straight out of a magazine." She glanced at my blazer, my shoes, the car keys dangling in my hand. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I ignored the sting. "I brought gifts. They're in the car." I went back outside, hauling in carefully wrapped boxes, each one chosen with thought. Mom's eyes widened when she saw the tablet Maggie's kids squealed over their toys. Isabel thanked me softly for the appliances, but the air shifted almost immediately. You didn't have to spend all this money, Mom said, her lips pressed thin. It feels a bit much. Yeah, Sophie chimed in. It's not a competition. I froze. It's not. I just wanted to do something nice. Daniel cleared his throat awkward. We appreciate it, Lisa, really. But Maggie leaned forward, her voice coated in sugar. Sometimes simple is better. Kids don't need expensive things to know they're loved. The room hummed with unspoken judgment. My gifts meant as bridges were suddenly weapons turned against me. I swallowed the bitterness and tried again. Actually, I have some exciting news. I just got promoted again. I'm now regional director. That's nice, Mom interrupted, turning to Maggie. Did you bring the sweet potato casserole? Everyone's been craving it. My words died in my throat. Dinner prep became a stage where I was cast as the outsider. Maggie moved around the kitchen like it was her kingdom, refusing my offers to help. You don't know how Mom likes things done, she said briskly. Sophie laughed at some joke I wasn't part of. Daniel talked shop about the garage, earning nods of approval. I tried to join in. Funny you mentioned garages. I actually just worked on a campaign for a major automotive company. Lisa, Mom cut me off, voice sharp. Don't turn everything into work. This is family time. The words struck like a slap. Later, when we gathered around the table, I realized there were only 7 chairs. 8 people, 7 chairs. Beverly had done the same once in an old memory, except now it was Sophie laying out the places. Sophie, you forgot one, I said lightly. She blinked. Oh, right. But the kids are on the floor anyway, so you can use the folding chair from the kitchen. The folding chair? Rusty metal legs, sagging seat. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile. Of course. I sat lower than the rest, looking up at their faces lit by candlelight. It was more than uncomfortable. It was humiliating. Every fork clink, every laugh felt like confirmation I didn't belong here. The conversation swirled above my head. Maggie bragged about balancing her job and kids. Mom glowed with pride. You're such a devoted mother, she said warmly. Daniel described a family he'd built a house for. Honest work, Mom praised, eyes shining. Sophie told a story about comforting a patient during a night shift. Mom reached across the table, squeezing her hand. That's real kindness, darling. I waited. I waited for my chance. Finally, I spoke. My team just launched a campaign that created over 200 jobs across the Midwest. Real families will be able to put food on the table this Christmas because of it. For a second silence. Then Mom sighed. Lisa, money isn't everything. Maggie nodded solemnly. Some people lose sight of what truly matters when they chase titles. The heat rose in my cheeks. It's not about money, it's about impact. Sophie smirked. Impact you'll never see. We're here. You're out there. Big difference. My hands trembled under the table. Nathan's voice echoed in my head. They won't change. I laughed bitterly. Funny, because I've been here more than you know. They didn't catch the edge in my voice. Not yet. But the words were building inside me, sharper with every breath. I didn't know it then, but that folding chair was more than furniture. It was the line they'd drawn, and the line I was about to erase with fire. The night wore on, and the house hummed with the same old rhythm my siblings, laughing Mom's voice rising above the chatter me on the outside, pretending not to notice the ache in my chest. Candle wax dripped down onto the tablecloth, the smell of ham and gravy heavy in the air, and that folding chair beneath me squeaked every time I shifted. It was like the house itself wanted to remind me I didn't belong. At one point, Maggie's youngest climbed onto her lap and asked, "Why doesn't Aunt Lisa live here too?" His voice was innocent, curious, but the room went still. Mom chuckled tightly. "Because your Aunt Lisa has important things to do in the city, not family things." The words landed like stones. My nephew squirmed, confused, before turning back to his toy car. My mouth tasted like metal. Daniel tried to lighten the mood. Well, at least Lisa makes enough to treat us all tonight, right? He grinned, but it wasn't a joke. Everyone laughed along except Isabel, who shot him a sharp look. I forced a smile. Sure. Maybe I'll just pick up the tab for the whole county while I'm at it. The laughter died quickly. Maggie cleared her throat, her eyes narrowing. See, that's what I mean. Everything is always about proving something with you. Proving. My voice cracked like glass. Yeah, Sophie said, folding her arms. You buy all these big gifts, drive up in some flashy car, and then act surprised when it feels like showing off. We don't need you throwing money around to feel loved. I wasn't. My voice caught breath hitching. I swallowed hard. I wasn't trying to buy love. Mom leaned forward, her expression sharp. Then what were you trying to do, Lisa? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like charity, and we don't need your charity. The room blurred. The heat in my face was unbearable. I wanted to slam my fist on the table to scream, but I just sat there gripping the edge of my plate until my knuckles went white. When dessert came out, pumpkin pie unevenly sliced, I barely tasted it. My chest was too tight, my thoughts spiraling. I watched as Mom praised Sophie again, calling her selfless, and patted Maggie's hand for always putting family first. I was invisible, lower than the children on the living room floor. Then came the moment that cracked everything open. I offered to help clean up stacking plates, scraping leftovers into the trash. As I carried a tray into the kitchen, I heard Maggie whispering to Mom, not realizing I was just a few feet away. She thinks money makes her important, Maggie hissed. Mom sighed. It's sad, really. She'll never understand what matters. No husband, no kids, no roots, just titles and checks. Sophie's voice chimed in low but cutting. Maybe she keeps sending money because she knows it's the only reason we let her back at the table. My hand froze on the tray. Plates rattled porcelain clinking. I stood there listening to my own family dissect me like I was a stranger. That was the moment the line snapped. I stepped back into the room, my face pale but my voice steady. You want to talk about money? I said, each word a stone hurled into their silence. Fine. Let's talk about it. All eyes turned to me. Maggie's fork clattered against her plate. For the last 2 years I've been paying for this house, I continued. My voice shook, but the anger held it steady. The rent, the lights, the groceries, even Daniel's car insurance when he couldn't cover it. The silence was deafening. Mom's face drained of color. That's not true, Sophie whispered. Oh, it's true. I stepped closer, heat rising off me like fire. You think I don't know how far behind Mom was? You think I didn't see the bills piling up the letters from the bank? Who do you think kept the lights on when the electric company came knocking? Who made sure this roof didn't cave in when the mortgage became rent? Me. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed again. Isabel reached for his arm, her eyes wide. Maggie shook her head violently. You're lying. Mom never asked her. I snapped, pointing at Evelyn. Mom's lips trembled. For a long, heavy moment, she said nothing. Then, finally, with a voice barely audible, she whispered, It wasn't supposed to be permanent. The room exploded. Maggie gasped. Sophie dropped her fork. Daniel muttered, Jesus Christ. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Not permanent. 2 years of monthly payments. 2 years of me carrying all of you while you sat here and called me selfish. You had no right, Mom spat suddenly, her voice sharp with humiliation. No right to throw this in our faces. No right. My voice rose. I gave you everything I had, quietly, without asking for thanks, and you sit here treating me like the outsider, like the spoiled one who doesn't understand family. The kids had gone quiet in the living room, sensing the storm. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall, each second slicing deeper. I looked at each of them, Maggie with her furious eyes, Sophie, pale with shock, Daniel silent, Isabel watching carefully. My hands shook, but the words poured out now unstoppable. You never wanted me here, I said. And yet without me, this house, this dinner, this so-called family wouldn't even exist. You've been eating at my table for 2 years, and tonight you sat me on a folding chair. Mom stood suddenly slamming her palms on the table. Money doesn't buy family, Lisa. You can't just buy your way back in. I met her glare, a cold smile forming on my lips. No, but it sure as hell can buy my way out. And that was when I knew. The reckoning was coming. The air inside that dining room grew so thick it was hard to breathe. Candle flames flickered as if they too sensed the storm about to break. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my voice, low, deliberate, cut through the silence. You want me to stop talking about money, fine. Let's stop pretending you weren't all living off it. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his chair scraping the hardwood. Maggie's face flushed crimson, her mouth a hard line. Sophie stared at me with wide, glassy eyes like a child caught stealing cookies. But it was Mom who held my gaze. Her lips pressed thin, her eyes burning with a mix of fury and fear. You had no right, she repeated louder this time, her hands trembling against the tablecloth. We never asked you, didn't you? My laugh was bitter. Mom, you called me. You asked me to cover the rent, just until things got better. That was 2 years ago. Then it was the electric bill, the groceries, insurance. Every time it was me. And I paid it thinking maybe one day I'd walk back into this house and finally be more than an afterthought. Maggie slammed her fork down. So what you think writing checks makes you a better daughter, that it erases the fact you left us? I leaned forward, my voice slicing like a blade. No, Maggie. It makes me the only reason this roof is still over your kids' heads. The words cracked something in her. She inhaled sharply but couldn't find a retort. The tension swelled until Isabel, who had been silent all evening, finally spoke. She's telling the truth, she said softly, her voice steady but firm. Everyone turned to her. She looked at Daniel, then at Mom. I've seen the bank letters. I've seen Lisa's name on the payments. I didn't say anything because it wasn't my place, but... She's right. The room froze. Even the kids in the living room had gone still, their laughter replaced by uneasy silence. Mom's face crumpled. You don't understand, she whispered. I didn't want the others to feel guilty. They have their own struggles. And I don't, I snapped. My voice broke raw. Do you think those checks didn't cost me anything? Do you think I'm just sitting in a high-rise lighting cigars with $100 bills? Every month I sent money, it was a choice between investing in my future and bailing this family out. And I did it because I thought maybe it would finally make me part of you again. You don't get it, Mom shot back, her voice rising. Family isn't about money. It's about showing up, about being here when it matters. I was here, I hissed, in the background, in the wires that kept your heat on, in the deposits that kept food on this table. You just chose not to see me. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the clock ticking each second, hammering into my skull. Then I did the one thing they never expected. I pulled my phone from my pocket, the glow of the screen sharp in the dim room. My hands were steady now, fueled not by fear, but by clarity. What are you doing? Mom's voice faltered, a tremor of panic threading through the anger. I'm done, I said simply. If my money doesn't make me family, then you don't need it anymore. I pressed the phone to my ear, dialing the bank. The line rang, then clicked. Yes, this is Lisa Morgan. I need to cancel several automatic payments immediately. Maggie shot to her feet. You can't be serious, Daniel muttered. Jesus, Lisa. But I held up a hand, silencing them. For once, I had their full attention and I wasn't letting go. The voice on the other end of the line asked me to confirm my identity. My pulse roared in my ears, but my words came out calm, crisp, like glass breaking. Yes, I'm here. Cancel the monthly rent payment to Whitfield Properties. Effective immediately. The room erupted. Lisa, hang up that phone right now. Mom barked, panic clawing through her tone. Her hands slammed flat on the table. The dishes rattled. I ignored her. Also, canceled the $300 electric bill to Green Mountain Power and the $400 grocery allowance. Yes, cancel all of it. Stop! Maggie lunged forward, her voice shrill. You're punishing us because your feelings are hurt. I turned, meeting her eyes with an icy stare. Hurt, Maggie. I've been bleeding for 2 years while you all pretended I didn't exist. This isn't punishment. This is me walking away. Sophie's face crumpled, her voice barely a whisper. My internet. The kids' homework. The internet bill spectrum, $80 monthly. Cancel that too, I said into the phone louder this time. Daniel shoved back his chair, his fists balled. What about my insurance, Lisa? You know I can't keep my business running without I cut him off. Cancel the $150 car insurance payment under Daniel Morgan. He froze his mouth, snapping shut. When I ended the call, the silence was absolute. The only sound was Mom's ragged breathing, the crackle of candle wicks burning low. I slipped my phone back into my blazer pocket like sliding a weapon into its sheath. There, I said, voice flat. Problem solved. You're free now. Free of my money. Free of my presence. Free of the daughter you never wanted. Mom's face was pale, her hands gripping the back of her chair like it was the only thing holding her up. You don't understand, she whispered. If you stop, we can't. I leaned closer. Can't what? Keep pretending I don't exist while living off me. Keep patting yourselves on the back for being the devoted ones while I paid your bills. Her lips trembled. We'll lose the house. Then, maybe I said my voice cold as steel, you'll finally understand what it feels like to be disposable. Maggie's kids began to whimper in the living room, sensing the storm without knowing its shape. Isabel rose quietly, gathering them, her eyes flicking to mine. She didn't say a word, but the small nod she gave me was enough. Someone in this house finally understood. I grabbed my coat from the back of the folding chair. My heart was still hammering, but my shoulders felt lighter than they had in years. Enjoy your Christmas, I said. You wanted me to sit on the edges of this family fine. Now you can live without me altogether. Mom's voice cracked, desperate. Lisa, please. But I had already stepped into the hallway, the scent of pine and cinnamon chasing me like ghosts. At the door, I turned back one last time. They were still frozen at the table faces, pale candles guttering down to stubs. Money doesn't buy love, I said softly, but neither does neglect. And with that, I walked out into the snow. The cold air hit my face like baptism, sharp and clean. For the first time in years, I felt alive. What they didn't know was that I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I still had the one thing they never expected, the truth. And I planned to use it. Snow fell in heavy sheets as I walked down the driveway, each flake stinging my face like tiny sparks. The black BMW waited sleek and humming under the porch light, its polished metal a sharp contrast to the sagging house behind me. I slid into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and for the first time all night, silence wrapped around me. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. Not from fear, no, that had burned away inside. What remained was something sharper, something colder. I drove through town past shuttered diners and darkened gas stations, the streets glistening with fresh ice. My phone buzzed with call after call, Mom, Maggie, Daniel. I let them ring into the void. By the time I pulled up to the boutique hotel on Main Street, my voicemail was a graveyard of unanswered apologies and half-screamed demands. I checked in my heels, echoing against the polished floor, the smell of cedar and lemon polish replacing the stifling scent of ham and wax. Up in the room, I shed my blazer, dropped my phone on the nightstand, and collapsed into the chair by the window. Outside, Christmas lights twinkled across rooftops, strings of red and green glowing against the snow. Inside my chest ached with something I couldn't name, grief maybe. Or freedom. I poured a glass of overpriced hotel wine, the bitter taste burning down my throat. The last words I'd spoken to them echoed in my head. Money doesn't buy love, but neither does neglect. I thought of Nathan, his voice steady in that Chicago bar months earlier. They won't change until you stop letting them take. Maybe, just maybe, he'd been right all along. Near midnight, my phone buzzed again. This time I answered. Lisa. It was Mom. Her voice was small, brittle. Please, can we talk? I stayed quiet. I went to the bank today, she continued. Her words cracked under the weight of them. I tried to cover the rent, the utilities. I didn't realize how much you'd been paying. I didn't realize. She broke off into a sob. I thought I was protecting the others. I thought if I leaned on you, it wouldn't burden them. But I see now I buried you instead. Tears pricked my eyes, but I held my voice steady. And when I tried to stand up tonight, you buried me again. I was wrong, she whispered. You didn't deserve that chair. You didn't deserve any of it. Her words twisted something inside me, but they didn't erase the years of silence, the countless holidays where I was an afterthought. So, what now? I asked flatly. There was a pause, then her voice trembling. Now. I need you. We all do. I stared out the window, the glass fogging with my breath. Below, couples walked arm in arm, their laughter carrying through the frozen night. I thought of Maggie's smirk, Daniel's silence, Sophie's cutting words. I thought of Isabel's quiet nod, the only one who had acknowledged me. Maybe they did need me. But that didn't mean I had to give myself away again. I ended the call without saying goodbye. Leaning back, I felt something shift inside me. They thought cutting me out, pushing me onto that folding chair, had destroyed me. But the truth, they had handed me my sharpest weapon, clarity. I no longer needed their approval to define me. I raised the glass to my lips again, whispering to the empty room, "They think I walked away? But really, I've only just begun. Because revenge doesn't always come with fire and fury. Sometimes it comes in silence when you take back every piece of yourself they tried to strip away, and you make them watch as you thrive without them." And as I turned off the lamp, letting the room fall into darkness, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: this story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, you know how heavy those wounds can be. But here's the truth: you don't have to keep carrying them. You have the right to walk away, to set boundaries, to claim your worth, even if the people closest to you refuse to see it. My story isn't finished, and neither is yours. So, tell me, have you ever been betrayed by the very people you trusted most? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned. This story isn't over.